Good evening, I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska, get any updates to the forecast, or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we have out for the state. You can also call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391, get any updates to the forecast through that means as well. We'll start off with a quick look at our warnings that we have out for the area, some advisories as well. Starting off in southeastern part of the state, we do have a wind chill advisory in effect along the Klondike Highway, and that is going to be in effect now until 6 a.m. on Sunday. Wind chills could get down as low as minus 45 degrees. Then in the Juneau area, we still have Taku winds in effect. A high wind warning is there until midnight Saturday night. Not expected to be as bad as it was on Thursday, but we do expect it to have winds up to as high as 75 miles per hour. And then down in the Ketchikan area, we do have a winter weather advisory out for snowfall, and that's going to be for 4 to 8 inches of snow, 9 a.m. on Saturday through 6 a.m. on Sunday. Taking a look now out over the Kodiak Island area, we do have a winter storm warning in effect for Kodiak Island. That is going to be in effect from 1 a.m. on Saturday until 4 p.m. on Saturday for 6 to 12 inches of snow with winds up to as high as 40 miles per hour. Could create some blowing snow conditions in the area. Visibilities could drop to around a half mile or less at times. And as we move up further to the north, we do have wind chills in effect for much of the central part of the interior and out to the east. The northern ones are going to be in effect until 3 p.m. on Saturday, and then the ones along the Alaska Range are going to be out until 6 a.m. on Saturday. Taking a look now out over our satellite imagery, we do have an area of low pressure extending down, bringing some snow to areas of the Bering Sea, some to the eastern locations of the eastern Aleutians, and then we do have also some lower cloud cover out along the coast. So watch this loop again, and some other clouds starting to move into the Kodiak Island area, getting ahead of the time when we are going to have some more snow for the area. Out over mainland Alaska, not a lot of cloud cover, helping to give us those lower temperatures for much of the areas, including low temps over the interior part of the state, leading to some of those wind chills and some area of lighter clouds up over the Arctic coastline. As we drop down to southeastern part of the state, we do have a system coming up from the south, not making it there yet, but that is going to bring a stronger push of warmer air as we continue to track that system as it approaches the area. So now we can get a quick look at this, bringing up some warmer air. Rain well off the coastline now, but that is approaching from the south. Snow right now out over the eastern part of the Gulf of Alaska. High pressure dominating northwest Canada, extending that ridging over the state, keeping precipitation well to the south of the mainland, with the exception of some of these areas along the North Gulf Coast or eastern parts of the Kenai Peninsula, and down in Kodiak Island, expecting to see some snow showers. Out over the Bering Sea, we do have some low pressure extending through the central part of the Bering, down by the eastern Aleutian Islands, bringing snow showers to many of the locations in that area as well. As we move into tonight, some of that snow will extend a little bit further to the east as the ridging out over the state backs off to the east to a little degree, and then we will have some of that snow making it to St. Lawrence Island, snow showers throughout much of the Bering Sea, down into the Aleutian Islands as well. And we do have our shortwave coming in tonight that is going to push into areas of Kodiak Island, helping to bring that snow and stronger winds to the area. Up over mainland part of the state, the ridging is still there, however, it is starting to retract to the east, and then down over the southeastern part of the state, you can see that tight pressure gradient leading to some of those stronger winds, especially in the Juneau area. Then we do have our system south of the Gulf right now, bringing in that warmer air, but starting to push that snow line ever so closer to the southeastern part of the state. And then as we move into Saturday, we are expecting that snow to push into some of the more southern locations of the Panhandle, with some of the very southern portions starting to see a mix to rain with some of those warmer temps coming up from the south. High pressure still over much of mainland Alaska, but starting to weaken throughout the day on Saturday. And as we look down over the south central part of the state, over Kodiak Island area, continuing to see snow into Saturday. Areas of Bristol Bay as well, and then throughout the Bering Sea down into the Aleutian Islands. Going to continue to see that snow cover down there, with our one lingering low just south of the Alaska Peninsula, bringing some snow to the area. Taking us into Sunday, we do have our low over the northern Bering, continuing to spin out there, bringing snow to areas of the northern Bering and starting to push a little bit further inland as the highs are continuing to weaken throughout the day on Sunday, bringing in some of that snow along the coast of the YK Delta up by the Point Hope and Point Lay areas. Throughout the Bering Sea as well, we're going to see those snow showers and the Aleutian Islands. And then as we get into Bristol Bay area, spreading a little bit more inland there as well. And our low now out over the northern part of the Gulf, a lot of warm air behind it. You can see that area where we're going to see that southerly flow pushing towards the Panhandle. Going to see snow primarily along the North Gulf Coast. However, some of the areas closer to the water getting closer, getting warm enough to potentially have a change over to rain. And as we move into the Panhandle area, we are expecting things to be a little bit warmer in those southern locations, transitioning some over to rain. However, northern locations still expected to see primarily snow, and we are going to have that snow push all the way up towards Haines and Skagway throughout the day on Sunday with that strong southerly push. As we look at our lows, we'll start off in southeast Alaska, dropping down for Saturday morning into the single digits for northern locations, including 8 degrees at Skagway and at Yakutat, and then into the teens for many of the more southern locations, a little bit warmer as we get further to the south. Out over south central Alaska, warmer along the coastline, seeing single digits along the North Gulf Coast of the positive numbers, but as we move to the inland locations, dropping down into the negatives, with Glen Allen being the coldest, minus 39 there, minus 17 at Talkeetna. So we move into the interior part of the state, dropping down well below zero into the minus 20s for many locations. Galena minus 23, colder there at Northway, minus 43 is expected. And then as we move into the Brooks Range and up along the Arctic coastline, a little bit warmer up there, staying into the negative single digits. As we move down the west coast of the state, Seward Peninsula, right around zero for much of the area. Gamble down to 8 degrees for Saturday morning. Into the negative single digits for the YK Delta area, however, staying above zero for the Bristol Bay area, with King Salmon at 10 degrees. And then into the eastern portions of the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, getting just below freezing. However, as we get into the central Aleutians, staying above freezing at 34 degrees for both Atka and Adak. St. Paul expected to get down to 27 degrees. Saturday afternoon, getting up into the mid-30s for the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula, getting up to around 20 degrees for the Bristol Bay area, with Dillingham getting up to 18. In the YK Delta area, we are getting into the positive single digits with Makoriak at 8 degrees, Nome up to 4 degrees. Then in the negative single digits for highs on much of the Arctic coastline, Utqiagvik a little bit warmer, getting up to 1 degree above zero for Saturday afternoon. Down in the interior portion of the state, we do have quite a bit of negative numbers for those highs and to the negative teens, with some places, especially out to the east, staying colder with highs only expected to get into the minus 20s. And Northway there, afternoon high only getting up to minus 35. Down in south central Alaska, getting above zero for the most part. Some areas of the Copper River Basin staying below zero there as well. And as we drop down towards Kodiak Island, 34 degrees expected high on Saturday afternoon. Down in the Panhandle area, getting up into the 20s, a little bit colder further to the north, up by Haines and Skagway, getting into the teens for those afternoon highs Saturday. As we look into Sunday morning, Ketchikan dropping down to 20 degrees, but altogether pretty warm for the southern part of the Panhandle. Colder as we get further to the north. Juneau getting down to 18 degrees, Yakutat at 15 degrees. Moving into south central part of the state, single-digit positive numbers along the North Gulf Coast. Cordova dropping down to 7 degrees, Valdez down to 6 degrees above zero. However, on the other side of the Kenai Peninsula, a little bit colder there. Kenai itself at minus 7 degrees. Anchorage down to minus 6. Talkeetna down to minus 17. In the interior part of the state, dropping down into the negative 20s for the most part. Still colder as we get further to the east. Northway, again, one of the coldest there at minus 41. So we get up to Fort Yukon area, minus 36 expected. Bettles, minus 27. Through the pass, a little bit warmer, minus 14 expected there. And then up along the Arctic coastline, expecting a little bit of warmer conditions, with staying down into, or getting down into the negative single digits, some locations getting down into the negative teens. Notice down the west coast of the state, Point Hope down to positive 1 degree for Sunday morning. Kotzebue down to minus 2, Shishmaref minus 3. A little bit warmer on the other side of the Seward Peninsula. Nome getting down to 3 degrees above zero on Sunday morning, and then 9 degrees for Gamble is expected for that morning low. Unalakleet down to minus 2 for that Sunday morning time frame. YK Delta area getting down below 0 for the most part. McCormick a little bit warmer there at 4 degrees, but Bethel down to -4. As we move into the Bristol Bay area, warmer as we get further to the south, closer towards the Aleutian Range. 13 degrees expected lows for King Salmon and for Iliamna. And then down in the Alaska Peninsula, Aleutian Islands, dropping just below freezing for the most part. Sand Point down to 31, as well as Cold Bay. And then Unalaska down to 30 degrees, with Shimia way out to the east, dropping all the way down to 29 above 0. 26 expected low for St. Paul. As we move into Sunday afternoon, getting at or just above freezing for the Aleutian Islands, Alaska Peninsula area, till we get further into the Bristol Bay area, only getting up into the teens for most locations. King Salmon and Dillingham getting up to 19. Right about 0 for much of the area of the YK Delta, and then into the lower single digits for much of the Alaska or Seward Peninsula, with Kotzebue staying colder, only getting up to -1 for that expected high. Into the negative single digits, some areas into the negative teens along the Arctic coastline, and then into the negative 20s for much of the interior, above 0 and near freezing for much of the North Gulf Coast and warmer air in southeast Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's take a look at the aviation forecast for Saturday morning with the flying weather. You can see that IFR conditions over portions of the northeast Gulf Coast spreading into the eastern Kenai Peninsula with IFR conditions there through Kodiak, down through the Alaska Peninsula, and also out through the eastern Aleutians. Also up through the Bering Sea, Bering Strait, and into Kotzebue Sound. Saturday afternoon, you can see that marginal VFR conditions there showing up in the southern panhandle. Otherwise, that spreads across the Gulf and into Kodiak Island, northern part of the Alaska Peninsula, and then marginal conditions as you spread out down through the peninsula and into the Aleutians, again through the Bering Sea, maybe even into the southern Seward Peninsula. For Sunday morning, you can see some marginal and IFR conditions there showing up in southeast Alaska over much of the area down there, and that goes out into the Gulf. And then as we spread across the Gulf and into Kodiak Island, marginal conditions there, and then down through the chain and portions of the Alaska Peninsula, also St. Lawrence Island, and up through the Bering Strait. And again, looking at the southeast there, you're going to see IFR conditions over portions of the Panhandle, and that spreads into the northern Gulf, with the frontal system moving in there with IFR conditions spreading out through most of the northern Gulf and even approaching the eastern Kenai Peninsula. Marginal conditions you get down through Kodiak and out through Alaska Peninsula, down through the chain and up through the peninsula, up through the Bering Sea, Bering Strait, and into Norton Sound and up through the northwest coast. Past conditions on Saturday, we're looking at mostly VFR conditions over much of the mainland, Enitovik, Adigan, Lake Clark, and Merrill, and the Alaska Range. We're looking at marginal conditions early and then switching over to VFR conditions later in the day. Rainy's looking VFR, so is windy, Isabel, and Mentasta VFR conditions on the southern side, moving into marginal conditions as you move out and into the interior with marginal conditions there. Tanita VFR conditions, again on Saturday. Portage also VFR conditions, and even Chilkoot and White Pass, but also must consider that they're going to have pretty strong winds through there for most of the weekend. Freezing levels, you can see that we have a little bit of elevated levels there in southeast Alaska, 2,000 to 4,000 feet. Otherwise, the surface freezing level spreads across the Gulf and into Kodiak Island and down through the Alaska Peninsula and out into the Bering Sea. Icing conditions, again, between 3,000 and 8,000 feet over southeast Alaska with isolated moderate and considerable moderate through that area, and that spreads across the Gulf into Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, and into southwest part of the mainland, southwest Alaska. And also we have above 3,000 feet there in the eastern Aleutians. Jet stream analysis this morning. 145 knots coming out of just south of Tokyo in Japan, into 140 as you get into closer to the Aleutians, and then down through that trough and up through the northwest part of the country with 95 knots there. Big high ridge across much of the north with 125 knots there. 9,000 foot winds, again, big ridge kind of moving out to the east over the northern Canada. 40 to 45 knots across much of the mainland. Nice low down here, weakening with 15 to 20 knots in that region, and then northwesterly winds coming across the Bering Sea. At 3,000 foot on Saturday, we're looking at, again, that nice little high pressure still remaining there. Easterly winds across much of the mainland with 10 to 20 knots in that area, and again, northwest winds through the Bering Sea. How does that affect our turbulence map? We're looking at below 4,000 feet across the eastern Brooks Range and into the interior, and then down through the southwest part of the state in Kodiak Island below 5,000 feet there, and a little spotty area below 4,000 feet in the Aleutians.
We have a big solar flare coming in, so we're out here on an aurora hunt. It's a CME, it's dynamite, coronal mass ejection. It's when the sun, it kicks off energy and these explosions that are larger than the Earth, explosion type things, coming off of sunspots. And if that energy is pointing straight at the Earth, it gets caught up in our magnetic field, and that energy, electrons, come down our magnetic field, collide with oxygen up there about 50 or a couple hundred miles high, and that's what generates the northern lights. My job as the photographer and the aurora hunter is to be in position, you know, location, location, location. And I like to think I'm composing. Mother Nature, it's a bit of a teamwork thing, you know, she's got to put on the show, but I have to be in the right position and of course with the right tools and the know-how. I've stopped keeping track of how much time I spend out here in terms of hours. It's more in terms of weeks or months, or at this point years now. You know, it was always in me. Even when I was a kid growing up in the lower 48, I would spend nights sleeping on our trampoline, just staring at the stars. I'm in 4th grade and I'm going, wow, look at those stars. And I'd see how many nights in a row I could sleep on the trampoline. And I think my record was 23 nights in a row. So I was doing kind of strange things for an Iowa country boy. I can remember specifically the very first time I saw the northern lights. It was 1989, the peak of the solar cycle, and I was going to graduate school in Laramie, Wyoming. And all of a sudden we had heard the northern lights were out. It's like, what are those? I'd never really seen them before. And my goodness gracious, we were on top of a mountain in the Laramie Range and they were turning blood red. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And the very first picture I took, that was 1990. Now, an old film camera, Pentax K1000 on a plastic Kmart tripod. Took 2 shots on slide film and got them back. And I thought, oh my gosh, this beautiful green thing swirling about. And from that moment, I was hooked. When I realized that you could preserve the auroras on film, I just experimented a ton. I'd had a heaping stack of slides, the no good ones. The experiments gone wrong, you know, too dark, fuzzy, out of focus, too light. I had this huge garbage can full of excess slide film, and that was just the learning curve. Well, when I go out here, it's all about getting the shot. And my wife and I, we've called it the hero shot. But the hero shot is the one where you just come home and you go, look at this. And everyone goes, wow, and you feel like a hero. It's a wonderful feeling, you know, it's It's good for the ego, of course. It's good for the business. But if you kind of strip that away, it's good for what's inside you, because that's really the hero moment in nature. And Mother Nature's putting on this show that is just mind-blowing. It's unbelievable. When I first resigned from my day job, that was in 1996, and decided I wanted to become a full-time aurora hunter, my goal from that moment and to this day still is to get one hero shot a year. I figured, and I'm talking the kind that somebody wants to buy from you and hang on their wall, where the auroras are extremely bright, very active, turning colors, where you can't believe your eyes. If you get to preserve a little sample of that with a photograph, well, it's what we call the hero shot. Wow, what a feeling. I mean, oh, you're elevated, levitating, you're lifted up. Your spirits are so high that I love that feeling. And I think I get that so much from seeing cool things in nature that I will go way out of my way to find that. And I can, the next day, well, I'll be just laying there thinking about it and thinking how lucky I was, or how fortunate. Of course, I just spent 2 weeks sitting there staring at the sky and not seeing anything, so you got to remember that luck is kind of a relative term, but I still just feel incredibly lucky to be even in a position to where I could have been there, taken a photograph of it, and just mainly experienced it. Well, that feeling could last for days.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to the marine forecast. Let's take a look at the sea ice analysis today. Pack ice has slowly retreated through the week this week, slowly retreated north. We also had lower concentration analyzed just north of St. Lawrence Island. Pack ice also extends down through Bristol Bay, and we also had ice filling in through Cook Inlet. The marine forecast for southeast, we're going to be looking at strong northerly winds through the northern and central inside waters, with heavy freezing spray warning through Saturday in those two regions. And the southern part of that inside waters, generally from the east at 25 knots. Out along the Gulf, we're going to be looking at winds from the east at 35 to 40 knots with seas as high as 20 feet. For southeast on Sunday, we're looking at continued small craft advisories there for the northern inside waters. Winds generally from the north at 30, gusts to 45. The central part of the inside waters generally from the northeast at 25 with gusts to 40, and the southern part from the southeast at 20 knots. Out along the Gulf Coast, generally winds from the southeast at 30 to 35 knots, seas as high as 16 feet in northern sections. Saturday's forecast for southeast, generally from the northeast across the Gulf, 30 to 45 knots, seas as high as 22 feet in the southern part. Out along the Cook Inlet, we're going to see winds generally from the northeast at 20 to 40 knots with gales out there in the southern part of the Cook Inlet with seas as high as 17 feet, I'm sorry. And for south central on Sunday, winds generally from east of the northern part, switching around to the northeast at 25 knots, and then northerly at 20 knots there in the eastern part of the Gulf. Out on the Cook Inlet, 10 to 25 knots, seas as high as 9 feet there. And for Saturday's forecast, Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, Shelkoff Strait, northeasterly at 40 knots, bringing gale force winds there. And then 30 to 25 knots out along most of the Gulf here with seas between 16 and 18 feet on the south side. On the north side, we're going to be looking at Bristol Bay, northeast for 30 knots and 25 to 30 knots there along the north side of the Alaska Peninsula. For Sunday, again, winds come down a little bit, especially in the Shelkoff Strait. Winds from the northeast to 20 to 25 knots on the south side of the peninsula, northwesterly 25 knots, Bristol Bay and the north side of the peninsula 25 knots. For the Aleutians, we're going to be looking at winds from out along the western Aleutians, northwesterly at 25 knots. That spreads a little bit farther east to 25 knots. Winds generally from easterly direction as you get closer towards the Alaska Peninsula. For Sunday's forecast, winds generally from the northwest, 20 to 25 knots. Seas die down a little bit, 10 to 11 feet on the south side. The west coast, marine forecast, out along the pack ice, we're looking at generally winds from the east at 15 to 25 knots there in the Kuskokwim Delta. And then out ahead of that pack ice, St. Matthew Island from the southeast at 20 knots, Pribs southeast at 20 as well. Sunday's forecast, looking at winds generally from the northeast, 10 to 25 knots. Out in front of that pack ice, looking at 20 to 25 knots generally from the southerly direction. Arctic coast, Beaufort Sea, from the east at 15 knots, offshore winds across much of the coastal waters here and through the Bering Strait, 15 to 25 knots there, and continued offshore winds through much of the Bering Strait and through the northwest, and Beaufort Sea generally from the west at 10 knots. Tonight's weather, we're going to be looking at still strong pressure gradient here in the southeast with a low pressure system moving into the Gulf. Mixed precipitation out ahead of that system, a weak trough bringing snow showers to Kodiak Island and portions of the Alaska Peninsula, and troughing through much of the Bering Sea with snow showers out there. And for Saturday's forecast, again, strong pressure gradient, weakening system here in the Gulf, snow showers continue in Kodiak Island, and much of the same for much of the Bering Sea and Aleutians. This has been Eric Holler with the National Weather Service.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.